forever and ever.
Dr. Sleep is a movie that absolutely nobody has gone to see. It involves the story of now adult Danny Torrence, who similarly to his dad Jack is now battling his own alcoholism, while also trying to protect a young girl named Abra who shines just like him from an evil cult of vampiric people known as the True Knot. The Shining is one of my favorite horror movies and one of my favorite Stephen King novels of all time. So back in the day when King said he was going to write a sequel to The Shining, I was like, is it really necessary? It seems like it's just kind of its own thing. It doesn't need a sequel. But then he wrote Dr. Sleep, which as you can see I do own a copy of, and I bought this fucking thing when it first came out. Still haven't read it. So I thought, yeah, there's no way they're going to eventually turn this thing into a movie. The Shining is kind of its own thing, and it deviated a lot from the actual book, so trying to do the sequel to the novel of The Shining as a movie is going to be really hard to do because there's so many things that are different, and yeah, it just seems like a fool's errand. But I do have to say, I really do fucking love this movie. I thought it was damn near excellent. Now, this is definitely not The Shining Part 2, and I hope a lot of people that maybe were turned off by this movie understand that. This is not just simply going back to the Overlook for 2 hours and digging up old ghosts and doing this same shit over again. In a way that does kind of happen, but this is its own unique story. The whole stuff with The Shining really kind of bookends this whole movie. There's some stuff in the beginning, and then there's the whole last act of the movie. And one complaint I did hear levied towards this movie was that it was too long. 2.5 hours isn't that long. I mean, I could understand if it were 3 or 3.5. Now that's a fucking long movie. But 2.5 hours? Especially for a Stephen King movie? I feel like that's pretty standard. And for 2.5 hours, this movie was really well paced. Now, it does start off slow, and I'm not going to say it's a slow burn because it's really not a slow burn type of movie. But in the beginning, it is slow because you're introducing everything. You're introducing the audience back into this world that we haven't been to in 40 years. So you got to kind of ease people in. You got to dip that toe into the water, so to speak. But then, once the story gets going, it really does ramp up and it just takes off like a fucking roller coaster.
Hello, Danny.
And I also love how meticulously everything was recreated from the first movie. Even down to the Overlook Hotel itself. It was so meticulously detailed that it literally looked like they just went back in time and stepped onto the set from 1979 and just filmed these scenes while that set was still there. I give major props to the director Mike Flanagan and the production designer. They fucking killed it on recreating the Overlook Hotel. It was fucking stunning. I'm sitting here talking about it and getting goosebumps again, just thinking about it. Even down to the actors that they got to play the old roles of Wendy, Jack, and Dick Halloran. They each did such a great job of channeling the actors and the performances from that Kubrick movie. And one scene in particular that I do love in this movie is when Danny goes back to the Overlook Hotel and he goes to the bar that his dad sat at. And if you remember in the original Shining, the dad, Jack, was talking to Lloyd, the bartender. Danny does the same thing. He goes back to the bar and he's sitting there, and Lloyd the bartender shows up, but it's not Lloyd the way that we know him from the original Shining. It's actually his dad, Jack. It really throws you off. You're like, holy shit, when you see it. And then you got to remember that that's not really Jack. That's the hotel using the guise of Jack to try to get to Danny. And the back and forth between Danny and Lloyd or Jack or the hotel, however you choose to view it, is really fucking good. And I love the fact that it's the hotel trying to take Danny the same way that it took Jack back in The Shining, and Danny resists and it pisses the hotel off. It's hard for me to put into words, but when you watch the movie and you see it, you know the scene I'm talking about. It is just, it's fucking awesome. I loved it. It sort of has like a Return of the Jedi, Luke turning down the Emperor moment, and I think that's probably why I dig it.
These empty devils, they'll eat what shines. And they've noticed that little girl.
Wow.
What I really love about this movie is that I think for the first time this year, at least out of the movies I have seen, is that we really get a true, well-defined, and really just evil villain that you do really root against. Because I think the problem with a lot of movie villains nowadays is that it's almost treated like heels in professional wrestling, where they're supposed to be bad, but we end up sort of almost rooting for them anyway in this weird sort of like anti-hero thing that we put upon them. Up to a point you could do that with the True Knot in this movie, but they're so heinous and evil in what they do and what they're after that I feel like there's no way you can possibly root for them. And it feels so good in the one scene where they get their comeuppance, and I was sitting there like fucking fist pumping in the theater like, yeah, just fucking take it. You all deserve to fucking die. Now what the True Knot are this like group of like people. They're almost like vampires in a way, but instead of feeding off like blood from people, they feed off of the shine of these special psychic people. And it comes out of them in like this steam sort of way. So when they kill these people, as they're dying, they're letting out this steam, and these True Knot vampire-like people just sort of inhale it, and that helps them live, but they aren't immortal. I mean, it helps them like live for like thousands of years, but they can still die. They are just really, really well-defined villains, especially Rose the Hat, who right now is probably #1 on my list of movie villains for 2019. To me, what makes her such a great villain is, much like I said about the rest of the True Knot themselves, her motives are well-defined. You know what she's after. You know who she is as a person, what type of person she is. And she's very cold and calculating. She's very manipulative. She also has this sort of like hotness to her. Like I can't describe it. She's just a great character, and she was fucking awesome. And I loved seeing her get what she fucking deserved at the end of this movie.
Come and play with us forever and ever.
But if I did have to levy one complaint against this movie, I would say that it's the last act when they go back to the Overlook Hotel. Don't get me wrong, I love the moment when they're going back, when that music hits, and Jesus Christ, it gave me goosebumps. And, you know, they're driving at night through the snow and the mountains, and the opening themes of The Shining is playing, and like I said, my body was just one big fucking fat goosebump. But my criticism of all that is it just feels so sort of tacked on, and it feels just kind of shoehorned in because they wanted that connection back to The Shining. And this is one of the big differences between the book and the movie. You know, in the book, the hotel has burned down, so they just go back to the grounds at which the hotel was at. But because in Kubrick's movie, the hotel still stood, they wanted to find a way to still bring that back. And I give Mike Flanagan, the director, a lot of credit for managing to somehow merge Kubrick and King and still make it work. Like I said, it feels tacked on, but it still really works. It's just one of those things like, did it really need to go back there? Yes and no. I appreciate it from a fan, and I thought it looked fucking awesome. And like I said, it really just got to me because I'm such a huge Shining fan. But in terms of the overall story, it probably didn't need to go back. But I'm going to give Dr. Sleep a hot buffalo on the wing scale. It has its little bits of flaws here and there that keep it from being an atomic fire, but there's so much excellent shit that I feel like this movie is a must-see if you are a Stephen King fan, if you're a horror movie fan, if you're a fan of The Shining. This movie is a must-see, and it fucking irritates me that it is bombing the way that it is at the box office. I personally don't understand it, because everybody that I've talked to that has gone to go see this movie has said that they love it. You know, maybe if word of mouth keeps going on this movie, it could sustain a decent kind of box office performance. I'm not expecting it to just suddenly spike and everybody loves it, but people just go out there and see this fucking movie. It is well worth your money. I highly, highly recommend it, and that is all. But anyways, that was my take on Dr. Sleep. It's a movie I was looking forward to for a while because I'm a huge fan of The Shining, and yeah, it fucking delivered. I loved it. go and see it. But if you did like this half-ass review, please like and subscribe below. Please check out some of my other videos just right over here. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios, and GTFO!